You were talking about the shakedown, the extortion of 1/3 of your money when you hadn't done anything wrong and they were conceding it. St. Augustine once said that government without justice becomes just a band of robbers.
Correct.
And we don't want the police to be mimicking the tactics of the worst thieves on the street. So thank you very much for your participation. Come now to Ms. Tlaib for your 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you so much, Chairman Raskin, and I really appreciate, Ms. Harris, you helping put a human face behind much of that's being discussed in this committee, and very, very important hearing. You know, civil asset forfeiture has been a major issue in my district. In 2017 alone, 400 of my residents, without being charged with a crime, like my colleague, lost their vehicles to Wayne County's Operation Push-Off. They didn't have the kind of resources that some of my colleagues have here. I mean, this is life-changing for them. The operation targeted disadvantaged communities, involved officers stopping individuals and seizing vehicles if they suspected, not proved, suspected that they've been involved in a crime. I find it extremely outrageous. A vehicle can be a lifeline for so many of my residents. Individuals who wanted to challenge these forfeitures could expect the process to take months or even years. Naturally, they could also pay $900, quote, settlement fee, basically a legalized bribe, in my view, for the return of their property. And of course, all of the proceeds went straight to the police department. If anyone else was doing this, it would be called extortion. The fact that there are studies now that show that civil asset forfeiture does not significantly reduce crime or improve policing capabilities in our country. A recent study by the Institute for Justice that looked at data from 5 states, including my own, found, quote, no evidence that forfeiture proceeds help police fight crime, whether in terms of solving more crimes or reducing drug use. This table, Mr. Albin, from the report shows civil asset forfeiture has no significant impact on drug use. Can you quickly summarize this table and its meaning for my colleagues on the effectiveness of civil asset forfeiture?
Sure. So this study compared the federal data on illicit drug use and specific categories of drug use, including marijuana, non-medical prescription drugs, cocaine, and found there was no correlation between increases or decreases in the use of civil forfeiture and increases or decreases in drug use rates of the various categories depicted in that table.
And the next table, if you look right here, next table shows the effect of forfeiture on crime clearances, or the number of crimes solved by police. Can you briefly walk us through this table and its meaning?
Sure. So the top level takeaway is that there was no associated correlation between increases or decreases in the use of civil forfeiture and on crime. However, there was an inverse relationship between crime clearance rates and the use of civil forfeiture. And so what this table shows is that when you divert law enforcement priorities to things like highway interdiction or community interdiction programs where you're stopping people on the streets and taking away their money, instead of actually solving violent crimes, you end up with lower crime clearance rates, which should not be a goal.
No, thank you for that. Ms. Ahmed, I'd like to conclude with your thoughts, on this greater conversation, and it has been a conversation around policing in our country and reform. In your view, what does the fact that increased revenues from civil asset forfeiture don't actually improve crime rates or drug use tell us about the need for civil forfeiture reform?
Thank you for the question. Right, I agree. It tells us that there's a need for civil asset forfeiture reform, that crime rates are not decreasing. And again, it brings us back to this is about process. It's about due process. It's about involving a judge in the process so that there is a neutral arbiter, but it is also about oversight. It is about accountability. If a town in Georgia of 30,000 spends over $200,000 on an armored truck based on using federal equitable sharing proceeds, the question is, were stakeholders in the community involved? This was all done behind a black box, and it wasn't learned of until after the purchase was made. Others in the community may have wanted to spend that money differently. So if we can bring transparency to the process And if we can remove the profit motive by directing proceeds to a general fund that is controlled by a legislative body in a public and open manner, that would make a tremendous difference.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, and that's something very much my colleagues and I all agree about, is transparency. And so, again, thank you so much for being part of this process, and thank you again to Ms. Harris, who shared her story. I think it's really important to remember that these are families and folks behind all of these processes, and if we don't get it right, it really is life-altering change for them. Thank you so much, and I yield.
Ms. Tlaib, thank you so much. Ms. Presley, if you're out there, you're recognized for your 5 minutes. It looks like she had, oh, there you go, Ms. Presley.
Thank you, Chairman Raskin, for convening today's hearing.